Does Groff die in Outer Banks Season 5? Chandler Groff's final fate explained. Warning: major spoilers for Outer Banks Season 5. Yes, Chandler Groff dies in the final season. After killing his own son JJ and escaping with the Blue Crown, Groff spends much of Season 5 trying to stay ahead of the Pogues. But eventually, his story comes to a brutal end. This is the final fate of one of the biggest villains in Outer Banks. So, does Chandler Groff die in Outer Banks Season 5? Yes. And considering everything Groff did throughout Season 4 and the beginning of Season 5, his death becomes one of the most important moments of the entire finale. Groff isn't just another villain the Pogues have to defeat. He's the man who killed JJ Maybank. He is JJ's biological father. And his actions completely change the final chapter of the series. So, how does Groff die? And does Kiara get the revenge she's been waiting for? Let's go through his entire final storyline. What happened to Groff at the end of Season 4? To understand Groff's fate, we need to go back to the Season 4 finale. The Pogues travel to Morocco while searching for the legendary Blue Crown. They believe the crown could be their next great treasure. But the treasure hunt becomes much more personal when Groff arrives. By this point, viewers already know that Groff is JJ's biological father. Their relationship is incredibly complicated. Groff was not the father JJ needed. Instead, JJ grew up suffering because of his father's actions and the terrible environment surrounding his childhood. Despite everything, JJ still wants answers. And that relationship eventually leads to tragedy. When the Pogues discover the Blue Crown, Groff confronts JJ. JJ refuses to give up everything they fought for. Groff becomes increasingly violent, and then he does the unthinkable. He stabs his own son. JJ collapses. Kiara is there. The Pogues are devastated, and Groff takes the Blue Crown and escapes. That is where Season 5 begins. Groff isn't simply a criminal anymore. He's the person the Pogues want to find more than anyone else. Why does Kiara want Groff dead? For Kiara, this isn't about treasure. It isn't even really about the Blue Crown. It's about JJ. Kiara loved JJ. She watched him die, and she blames Groff. Throughout Season 5, Kiara becomes increasingly determined to find him. The other Pogues understand why. John B., Pope, Cleo, and Sarah are also grieving. JJ was their best friend. He was part of their family. But Kiara's grief is especially intense because she had a romantic relationship with him. She doesn't simply want Groff arrested. She wants him to pay. And that creates an important question. Will Kiara actually kill Groff? The answer is more complicated than simply saying yes. Groff keeps running. After JJ's death, Groff escapes with the Blue Crown. He believes the crown can give him what he has always wanted: money, power, and a way out. But the Pogues refuse to let him disappear. They track him. They investigate his movements. And they repeatedly get closer. Groff is forced to keep moving. And this is where the season starts showing his desperation. He's no longer the powerful man who believes he can control everyone. He's being hunted. And the people hunting him are the very teenagers he thought he could defeat. The irony is that Groff helped create the people who eventually bring him down. JJ's friends become his biggest threat. Does Groff ever regret killing JJ? This is one of the more complicated aspects of Groff's character. Groff is clearly capable of violence. He murdered his own son. But the show also gives viewers glimpses into his psychology. Groff has spent years making terrible decisions. He is obsessed with treasure. He's obsessed with control. And he's willing to sacrifice other people to get what he wants. His relationship with JJ is especially tragic because there are moments where it appears that Groff wants some kind of connection with his son. But he never knows how to be a father. And when he finally gets the chance to choose between his son and the treasure, he chooses the treasure. That decision defines him. JJ is dead. Groff has the crown. But now he's completely alone. What happens to the Blue Crown? The Blue Crown becomes one of the biggest objects in the final season. It's valuable, but there's also a legend surrounding it. Some characters believe the crown possesses supernatural powers, including the ability to bring back the dead. That creates a huge emotional possibility. Could JJ somehow return? Could the Pogues undo Groff's actions? For Kiara especially, the idea is incredibly tempting. But the story ultimately doesn't allow JJ's death to simply be erased. The crown becomes more symbolic. It represents the Pogues' obsession with finding something that can fix everything. For years, they've believed that the next treasure will solve their problems. But JJ's death is different. No treasure can undo what happened. And that becomes one of the most important lessons of the final season. Groff's final confrontation. As the Pogues close in on Groff, the situation becomes increasingly dangerous. Groff knows that his time is running out. He's being hunted from multiple directions. The Pogues want revenge. Other criminals want the crown. And Groff has fewer and fewer people willing to protect him. Eventually, his obsession with escaping catches up with him. His final confrontation brings the story full circle. The man who killed JJ is finally forced to face the consequences of what he did. And Groff dies. His death closes the main revenge storyline that began with JJ's murder. But the show doesn't treat it as a simple victory. Because Kiara doesn't suddenly feel happy. JJ is still gone. That is the important difference. Does Kiara kill Groff? This is where viewers need to pay attention to the emotional difference between revenge and justice. Kiara wants revenge. She wants Groff to suffer for what he did. But the final resolution isn't simply about Kiara becoming a killer. Instead, Groff's actions eventually lead to his own downfall. He spends the season running from everyone. His greed keeps putting him in increasingly dangerous situations. And eventually, he cannot escape the consequences. That allows Kiara to get something she desperately needs. Closure. But closure isn't the same as getting JJ back. And that's the emotional point. Why does Groff have to die? From a storytelling perspective, Groff's death is almost inevitable. Season 5 is the final season. There is no reason to keep Groff alive as a future threat. His entire character is connected to JJ. He represents the toxic family history that JJ spent years trying to escape. And killing Groff allows the show to close that chapter. JJ's biological father is gone. The man responsible for JJ's death has finally paid the ultimate price. Now the Pogues can begin moving forward. And that's exactly what the finale wants them to do. What happens to Kiara after Groff dies? This is perhaps more important than Groff's death itself. Kiara has spent much of Season 5 consumed by anger. She wants revenge. She wants justice. She wants someone to pay for JJ. But after Groff is gone, she has to face the things she has been avoiding. JJ isn't coming back. The Blue Crown can't magically repair her life. Killing Groff doesn't erase the memories. And it doesn't undo the final moments she shared with JJ. So Kiara has to learn how to live with her grief. That's one of the most mature parts of the final season. The show doesn't pretend that revenge solves everything. Instead, it gives Kiara the opportunity to finally move forward. What does Groff's death mean for John B? John B is also deeply affected by JJ's death. JJ was one of his closest friends. The two had been through almost everything together. So Groff isn't just responsible for Kiara's pain. He's responsible for John's too. But John B eventually reaches a different place. Sarah is pregnant. They're preparing to become parents. And John B has to think about the future. That's a major contrast. JJ's death represents the end of one chapter. Sarah's pregnancy represents the beginning of another. John B has to decide what kind of man he wants to become. Does he keep chasing danger forever? Or does he finally build a stable life? By the end of the series, the answer is clear. He chooses the future. What does Groff's death mean for the Pogues? The Pogues have spent years fighting enemies. Ward Cameron, Rafe,
Singh,
the treasure hunters, the criminals, and finally Groff. But Groff is different. He's the villain who caused the greatest personal loss. Once he's gone, the group no longer has a common enemy. They don't have another treasure hunt waiting for them. They don't have to run. They don't have to hide. They can finally start living. That's why Groff's death is effectively the end of the Pogues' final major conflict. Was Groff always evil? That's another interesting question. Groff isn't portrayed as a cartoon villain. He has a history. He has regrets. He has complicated relationships. but his choices define him. He repeatedly chooses greed over family. He chooses power over love. And when given the chance to save his son, he chooses the blue crown. That is the moment when there is essentially no turning back. Whatever sympathy viewers might have had for him disappears. He becomes the direct cause of JJ's death. And the final season makes him pay for it. So, does Chandler Groff die? Yes. Chandler Groff dies during Outer Banks Season 5. His death brings his storyline to an end after he spends the season running from the Pogues and attempting to keep control of the Blue Crown. But the emotional importance of his death isn't simply that the villain is gone. It's that JJ's killer is finally gone. Kiara gets the opportunity to move beyond the anger that has consumed her. John B. and the others can begin healing. And Groff can no longer threaten the Pogues or manipulate JJ's legacy. The final season, therefore, turns Groff's death into the final step of the revenge storyline. But the show also makes an important point. Revenge doesn't bring JJ back. It doesn't erase the grief. It doesn't restore the Pogues to the way they were before. What it does is remove the person responsible. And then the characters have to decide what to do with the lives they still have. That's where the ending becomes much more emotional. The bigger meaning of Groff's death. Groff spends his entire life chasing something. Money, treasure, power, the blue crown. But ultimately, he loses everything. JJ is gone. His relationship with his son is destroyed. The Pogues are hunting him. And the treasure he sacrificed everything for cannot save him. Meanwhile, the Pogues finally realize that the greatest treasure they've ever had wasn't something they could put in a box. It was their friendship. JJ represented that friendship. Even after his death, he remains part of the group. His memory influences Kiara. His death changes John B. And his story becomes one of the reasons the Pogues finally understand that they can't spend their entire lives chasing treasure. They have to live. They have to grow up. They have to move forward. So yes, Chandler Groff dies in Outer Banks Season 5. But his death isn't simply the end of a villain. It's the final consequence of the decision he made in Morocco. He chose the blue crown over his own son. And in the end, he loses everything. The Pogues survive. JJ's memory survives.